I debated praise a long time ago on John 15, I think it was. Or maybe it was just a conversation where they were trying to say this fire isn't necessarily about being lost. So first I would just point out the similarities between Matthew 13 and John 15 on the right, and Matthew 13 on the left. By the way, I think like in Genesis, there's this weird phrase where it's like, and there was no man to till the wild grass or whatever. And then you get the prophecy of the seed of the woman. And you see this metaphor run through scripture regarding plants, whether it be grass. And the metaphor is used even in the Old Testament, and then Jesus adopts those into his parables, obviously, because he's showing himself to be all the way through the text, I would argue. I am the true vine. And then on the left, Matthew, he who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. And notice on Matthew 13, we have the harvest is the end of the age. And Jesus is giving the interpretation, right? The good seeds are the sons of the kingdom. And by the way, in Matthew 8, sons of the kingdom are cast into outer darkness, just for reference. People like to say, if you're a son, you can't lose your salvation. Nothing about the language of sons in the Bible suggests anything about losing your salvation. It just means you're right with God. It just means you've been born again, or you're part of God's kingdom, his family, you're royal. Doesn't mean you can't be cast out just by the word sons, unless you want the Bible to contradict itself for the sake of a doctrine. So this is Matthew 13 is clearly, just couldn't be clearer, right? End of the age. Well, that's when he gathers up them to be burned, right? Notice, let's go there. We have the branches and the tares gathered, burned. So, I mean, it's clearly the same sort of metaphor. On Matthew 13, we have this necessity of Christ's people. And there's this language of, is what they gather up is all that offend and practice lawlessness. Cast them in the furnace of fire. And then over here, in John, of course, the opposite of the saved and the lost is this lawless. If you love me, keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. Who does not abide in my love, the Father does not abide in him, something like that. And of course, we see the epistles reiterating this, the commandments defining love, the 10 commandments. The first 4 being love towards God and the last 6 being love towards man. But this parallels. And another interesting thing about this, we have in Matthew 13, certainly the just plain end of the age thing, language, Jesus' return. Over here, it's not so clear in John 15. But I'll just point out the context of John 15 is John 14. And a lot of people miss this because of their doctrine about intermediate state. But if you go all the way back to John 13, a context starts right here. Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from this world to the Father. So the context is Jesus is going to obviously go to his crucifixion, his death and resurrection and ascension to the Father. That's the context. Then we have Judas being pointed out by Jesus, and then he leaves to do his business. And then once Judas is gone, once the betrayer is out of the room, Jesus, Jesus has an intimate moment. He said, Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going? Okay, let's see. So when he had gone out, now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, etc. Jesus is saying, where are you going? And then he says, Peter, you're going to betray me. You're going to deny me 3 times. But then he says, look, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, or many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I'm going to leave and prepare a place for you in his Father's house. But I'll come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Where I go, you know, and you know the way. That's like talking about following him, right? I am the way, the truth, and life. But he's talking about leaving, ascending to the Father. And he's like, where I'm going, you can't come. He says that over and over. They're like, they don't get it, right? And he's like, well, you can follow me. And he's like, I'm going to send you the Comforter. But what this is talking about is the second coming. I would believe that this proves that they don't go to heaven right when they die. But the point is, it's certainly looking back to the return of Christ, the second coming, which, of course, you can build a case for that. So I'm just saying that that ties this context leading into John 15. After he's told them all this intimate setting, then he gives the teaching of he's the true vine. And then he gives the same warning you see all through his ministry regarding, Matthew 25, etc. So this is, you could say this kind of connects it to the end in context, just like Matthew 13 speaks directly to the end of the age. But going into John 15, we have the same thing with Jesus talking about his second coming, which just helps tie John 15 even more so to as a parallel teaching here in Matthew 13. So there's absolutely no doubt that this is eternal judgment. I would say that the law, because Jesus gathers the tares when he returns. One taken, one left. One taken in Matthew 24 is the one in judgment. But then I would also argue, that's also the resurrection of the righteous, the beginning, the millennium, if you have that view. But I'm sure Dan does, but not Turretin fan. But I would say they're killed with the Antichrist because he makes everyone who doesn't have the seal of God take the mark of the beast. Everyone whose name is not written in the book of life takes the mark of the beast. And so, anyway, he says you have to be ready, like the 10 virgins, etc. Anyways, there's my thoughts on that, just for fun.